I shouldn't have knocked on her door. But the second I heard her voice through the wood, I knew I wouldn't walk away. It started with a leaky faucet. One of those small, stupid things that gives you an excuse to linger. I just moved into the apartment below hers. Old building, creaky floors, thin walls. I didn't even know her name yet, just that she had a laugh that cracked through ceilings and a voice that didn't match the woman I finally saw in the hallway. She opened the door that day barefoot, in jeans that clung a little too perfectly to her hips, hair tied up like she didn't plan on seeing anyone. And I was standing there with a wrench in one hand and a poor excuse in the other. "Hey, sorry. I think the leak from your kitchen's dripping through my ceiling. I can take a look if you want." She stared at me for a beat too long. Not rude, just like she was trying to remember something she shouldn't. Or maybe forget, right? "Yeah, come in." Her voice was smooth but a little frayed at the edge. Not sadness exactly, just thin, like she hadn't used it all day. Inside, her place smelled like rosemary and dust. There was a half-drunk glass of wine on the counter. One plate in the sink. A cracked photo frame face down by the bookshelf. I didn't ask. As I crouched under her sink, she stood too close. Not in a flirtatious way. More like someone who didn't realize how much space she filled until it was gone. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, brushing her hair back, eyes flickering away. "I'm not usually like this. My husband left this morning. For good." There was no tremble in her voice, just that same frayed edge. I should have said I'm sorry. Should have nodded, fixed the pipe, and left. But instead I said, "He's an idiot." Her head snapped toward me, startled. She stared again, not blinking, like she was deciding something. Then she smiled. Not the kind you give a stranger. The kind you give someone who sees too much and doesn't look away. "Thanks," she whispered. "That's generous coming from the kid downstairs." That stung more than I thought it would. But I smiled back. "I'm not a kid." Silence stretched between us. She didn't argue. She didn't smile again either. When I stood up, hands wet from the faucet, she handed me a towel. Our fingers brushed. Just once. Nothing dramatic. But she didn't pull away. Neither did I. "I'll, come back tomorrow," I said, voice lower than I meant. "Just to check if it's still leaking." "It won't be," she said. I turned toward the door. "But come anyway," she added, barely above a murmur. I paused. Halfway out. Halfway in. The sound of it hung in the air between us like smoke from a match that hadn't fully burned. She leaned against the counter then, arms crossed, watching me with eyes that didn't flinch. "My husband's gone," she said quietly, more to the room than to me. Then, locking eyes, "You're not." I went back the next day. Of course I did. I didn't even knock. The door was already open, just barely, like she'd left it that way on purpose. I stood outside for a second longer than I should have, just staring at the crack of light bleeding through. Then I stepped in, heart thudding louder than it needed to. She was in the kitchen, back to me, humming under her breath. Bare feet again. Same jeans, same loose softness in how she moved. Like she didn't expect anyone to watch her. Or maybe she did. "You came," she said without turning. "You left the door open." That's not an answer. I didn't give her one. She handed me a mug of something warm. Cinnamon. Maybe? Vanilla? I wasn't even sure if it was coffee or tea. I just held it, cupped it like it was something more than a drink. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "I don't usually let people in like this," she said, quietly. Her fingers were wrapped around her own mug, but she wasn't drinking, just holding it like a shield. I studied the space between us. Too close for friendly, too far for anything else. "I don't usually get invited," I said. Honest. Too honest. She finally looked at me, really looked. "You remind me of someone I used to know, before I got careful." "Careful?" She nodded, smiled like it hurt. "Yeah, before everything had consequences. Her voice cracked on that last word. And suddenly I felt it, the weight of all the unspoken things in her house. The photos she didn't display anymore. The wineglass that never quite emptied. The way she said "my husband" in past tense. But still like he was a shadow in the room. This wasn't just about a faucet. This wasn't just loneliness. It was something rawer, hungrier, but scared to name itself. "I can stop coming here," I offered. My voice came out too soft, too careful. "If this is a line." She tilted her head. "Is it, though? A line? I don't know." I looked at her hand. It was trembling barely, like a string held too tight for too long. She noticed, pulled it back to the side of her mug like nothing happened. "You don't feel like a mistake," she whispered. And there it was, the thing I wasn't ready for, the thing that made the room too warm, the silence too loud, the scent of cinnamon too sweet to be safe. She stepped closer, just enough. Her hand brushed my arm, not an accident this time. Her fingers didn't linger, but mine wanted to chase them. "You can stay," she said, so gently it felt like a dare. I opened my mouth. I almost said something stupid, something like "I think about you when I shouldn't." Instead, I just nodded. Once. She smiled, not the kind you give a stranger. The kind you give someone who's already inside something they shouldn't be. It started to rain while we sat on her couch. Not a drizzle. A sudden, heavy downpour. One of those storms that traps you, turns windows into mirrors, makes everything feel closer than it should. She lit a candle even though the lights still worked. Said she liked the way flame flickered when it wasn't sure of itself. I didn't know what to say to that. I just watched her. She had her legs tucked beneath her, one hand resting near her collarbone like she was holding herself in. Her sweater slipped a little off her shoulder. Not on purpose, not for effect. Just the natural slide of someone too tired to adjust anymore. "This used to be our couch," she said suddenly, her voice thinner than usual. "We picked it out after a fight. Isn't that funny? People do that. Use furniture as apologies." I let the silence stretch. Then, carefully, "Do you miss him?" Her eyes didn't meet mine. "I miss who I thought he was." I looked down at my hands. They were damp from the mug she'd handed me earlier. I wasn't even drinking it anymore. "You ever feel like you're too young to carry someone else's sadness?" she asked, almost teasing. But it wasn't a joke. Not really. "I don't feel young when I'm here," I said. She turned toward me at that. Slowly. Her expression unreadable, soft, but guarded. And then the moment cracked. A knock at the door. She flinched. We both sat up straighter, like kids caught passing notes. She didn't move right away. Just stared at the door like it might open on its own. Another knock. Louder. She stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her jeans. "Don't say anything," she murmured, then disappeared down the hallway. I sat there, frozen. The candle flame swayed a little harder now. The storm outside thickened against the glass. I heard a muffled voice. A man's. Then hers. Lighter, higher. Friendly, practiced. When she returned, she didn't explain. Just stood in the doorway looking tired. Not just from the guest. From everything. "Friend?" I asked. "My brother. Dropping off something." I nodded even though I didn't quite believe it. Or maybe I didn't want to believe it. She sat again, closer this time. Not quite touching, but enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off her. And then, without thinking, she reached over and tucked a curl of hair behind my ear. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't innocent either. It felt like history trying to write itself early. "I shouldn't do that," she said, her hand halfway to pulling back. I caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to feel her pulse. "I don't want you to stop." And the look she gave me then, it wasn't permission. It was panic, and want, and something deeply undone. Outside, thunder rolled again. Inside, neither of us moved. She didn't pull her hand away. Not right away. My fingers were still around her wrist, her skin warm and smooth against mine, and then she blinked like waking from something, and slowly slid her hand free. She stood, paced once, then turned back to me with her arms crossed like she needed something to hold. "I didn't think you'd stay this long," she said quietly. "You told me to." She laughed, not from humor, from disbelief. "Yeah, I tell myself a lot of things." Something about the way she said that, flat, without drama, hit harder than anything else could have. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring down at the flickering candle between us. "I think about you," I said. I didn't plan to. It just came out. She inhaled sharply. That was the first time I'd said something that made her flinch. "I know," she whispered. "You do. I see it in the way you look at me, like I'm something you want to save, or own, or figure out." I looked up. She was staring at me now, face unreadable but eyes bright, too bright. "I'm not a puzzle," she continued, "and I don't need saving. I never said you did." "No," she said, voice thinning, "but you think I'm this version of me that doesn't exist. And that's not fair." I stood, too fast. My chest was tight, my voice rough. "Then why did you let me in?" Her face twitched. Pain, regret, something unspeakable. "Because I was lonely." Silence. The word clanged between us, harder than a slap. She took a step back as if she'd dropped something dangerous at her feet. "I wasn't trying to use you," she added quickly. "But maybe I was trying to feel something. What if I'm feeling more than something?" Another silence. I saw it land. The meaning, the weight of it. Her eyes glistened. Not tears, not yet. Just heat, history, hesitation. Then she whispered, "Ask me something else." I didn't ask her something else. I just sat back down. She stayed standing. She didn't turn away this time, just stared at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words that wouldn't unravel us. That's when my eyes drifted up to the refrigerator behind her. A photo tucked under a magnet. I hadn't noticed it before, probably hadn't wanted to, but now it stared back at me. Him, her husband, arms slung around someone I knew, my brother. In the photo they were laughing, at some party years ago. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. I stood without thinking. "Who is that?" She followed my gaze, and froze. The silence was immediate, sharp, brutal. "That's..." she began, then stopped, took a breath. "That was before I met you." "You know him," I said. "You knew him before you ever opened that door." Her face paled. It wasn't planned. I didn't even recognize your last name at first. Not until you told me where you were from. And you never thought to mention it?" I didn't know how. I paced backward like the floor was suddenly unsteady. The air felt wrong now, too tight in my chest. "You knew he was my brother and you still..." "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, quickly, the words tumbling out. "You showed up with that stupid wrench and I felt alive again." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "He's not in my life anymore. You know that. But still, that's not a detail." She stepped toward me. Not with guilt, not with excuses, just bare honesty. "You think I don't lie awake at night with that picture in my head? You think I haven't asked myself 100 times if this was just another mistake?" She took another step. Her voice dropped. "But you're not a mistake to me." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because part of me wanted to walk out the door. To never look back. But the other part, the louder, hungrier part, just wanted her to say my name. Just once. Like it mattered more than his. She reached out. Her fingers hovered near mine. Hesitant. Fragile. Her hand didn't tremble this time, mine did. "Say something," she whispered. I looked at her. Really looked. Past the regret. Past the half-spoken justifications. And all I saw was the same woman who'd left her door open. who'd watched me like I was already inside a part of her she'd promised not to give anyone again. You said he looked through you, I finally said. I don't. She didn't respond. She just stepped forward and rested her forehead against mine. And then her phone rang. Once, twice. Neither of us moved. The name on the screen lit up behind her shoulder. My brother. The phone kept ringing. I watched the screen light her face in pulses, soft blue flickers across her cheekbones. She didn't move. Her forehead still rested against mine, breath shallow, like the air between us was holding something back. Ring, ring, then silence. She reached behind her slowly and silenced the call without looking, then turned her phone face down on the table. Neither of us spoke. I thought you'd leave, she said quietly. I almost did. She pulled back enough to look at me. Her eyes were rimmed in something unspoken. Fear, exhaustion, tenderness. All of it. Then why didn't you? She asked. I could have said it was because of how she looked at me. Because when she laughed, it felt like a secret. Because I needed her more than I was ready to admit. But all I said was, because I know what it's like to be left. Something shifted in her face then. Not softened. Cracked. I've done a lot of wrong, she whispered. Stayed in things too long. Let people leave too easily. I don't know how to let myself want something new. Especially not like this. Not with you. Why not with me? Her eyes didn't blink. Because you make me feel like I haven't already lived my story. That stopped me. I don't know why, but it did. The idea that I could be a beginning, not just an interruption. She stepped back, folding her arms. Like she was preparing for goodbye. Like her body already knew this would cost something. This won't be easy, she said. Not with your family. Not with the past. People won't understand. Do you? She met my eyes. I'm trying to. And that was the most honest thing she'd said all night. I stepped closer again. Slowly this time. No more trembling. No more edge of a moment chaos. Just closeness. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Then let's not define this yet, I said. Let's just not walk away from it. Tears didn't fall. They just welled heavy, unspilled. Her voice cracked when she said, Promise me one thing. Anything. If I start to disappear again, pull me back. My chest tightened. I will, I said. But only if you promise not to run when I need you to stay. She gave a shaky nod. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't clean. But it was real. We sat back on the couch in silence. Fingers laced, her head resting on my shoulder. Outside, the rain had stopped. But neither of us moved to check the window. Because for the first time, we weren't waiting for the storm to pass. We were choosing to stay in the quiet that came after. The next morning, nothing dramatic happened. No dramatic kiss. No tangled sheets or impulsive mistakes. Just coffee. 2 mugs. Steam rising between us. The kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. She wore a robe that looked lived in. Her hair still tied up from the night before. I sat at her kitchen table, watching the light creep across her floor like it was learning the room all over again. Everything felt still, not fragile, just real. I told him, she said suddenly. My hand paused halfway to my cup. Told who? My husband. Yesterday. Before you came. Told him I wouldn't wait for him to come back. I blinked. He's been trying? She nodded. Off and on. For months. Apologies that came with conditions. Promises made too late. I didn't answer him until yesterday. And you chose to tell me that now? She looked up at me, tired and bare but steady. I needed to say it when it wasn't about guilt. When it wasn't about proving something to you. Just truth. I nodded slowly. No surge of victory. Just the slow exhale of something long held in. And your brother? She asked gently. I smiled, a little sad. He called again last night. I let it ring. I'll talk to him. But on my time. Not his. She walked over and set a hand on my shoulder. Not in apology. Not in possession. Just there. Grounding. We'd done it backwards. Grief first, touch second, honesty last. And maybe that's why it worked. Because nothing about us was born from fantasy. Came from the gaps. The empty spaces. The silences. The ache of being seen in moments most people hide. I don't know what this will look like, she said, brushing a hand through her hair. The world's going to think it's wrong. They don't get a vote, I said. She laughed. Soft, quiet. But this time it didn't sound cracked. Sounded whole. Later that morning, as I got up to leave, she didn't ask when I'd be back. I didn't promise anything. But she handed me a note before I stepped out. I opened it once I got home. You were never the mistake. You were the reason I stopped making them. We didn't fix each other. She still had photos she hadn't thrown away. I still had calls to return. But for once, neither of us flinched from the weight we carried. And maybe that's what love looks like sometimes. Not rescue. Not rescue fantasy. Just two people who decide not to disappear anymore.